Motivation is another important thing that you need to remember in the TKT. We're going to look at some of the exams, sample questions. My motivation is my reason for doing anything. I may want a promotion. I may want my salary to increase. I may want to be known amongst my peers. So it is with young learners. But young learners do not have motivation for coming to school. They didn't come to school because they want to be in school. No, they'd rather be at home watching TV or playing with their devices. They're in school because their parents want them to be in school. So you as a teacher has to motivate them. You can motivate them by creating a comfortable or attractive classroom. You can motivate them by creating, good relations within the classroom and using activities learners are excited and they're just willing to learn. You can create rapport between learners. Like as the term is starting, you can play games in the classroom to get learners to warm up to one another so they can collaborate, they can do things together. Your task can be motivating. Instead of doing a boring lesson, maybe a boring writing lesson, writing how I watched a house burn down, which is unlikely to have happened, you could say your composition learning lesson today is to write a menu and describe how to cook a pot of Indomie noodles. Okay, we're interested in the language and how they are able to express their creativity and show the forms and all of that. So why don't you give them topics they'd be interested in? Interests. Learners have different types of interests, and our learning goals are different. So if you know that a learner is learning a subject because they have a hope that they want to be maybe a scientist or whatever, you can use that as a motivation to help the learner learn. And then we have personal relevance. Are the tasks you are doing in the classroom, are they relevant to your learners or are they relevant just to you alone? Okay, so in a first language situation, we learn language differently. I'm sure you've observed babies learning. Nobody's teaching them to say, listen, if you were hungry, say, I'm hungry. Nobody does that. The child learns in the L1, that's a mother tongue or first language. The child learns by listening. They start learning when they are babies. And we have what is called a silent period when they're not talking, but they're listening. Okay? And in the context of learning, it's usually at home and they are exposed to the language. And I highlighted in my slides the words that are important for you to learn in the TKT: silent period or exposure or exposed to the language. We just talk and let them hear. Then they begin to pick up the language. That's a linguistic term. They pick up the language. They're not learning the grammar, but they're beginning to pick it up. Then they have a need to communicate. They're playing with you and all that. They want to talk back. So they're learning the language in their own way. The language is simple, it's not complicated. And they try it out in the natural environment. And when they get it right, everybody is praising, yay, she got it right. We don't correct babies like we correct children in the classroom. You're wrong. No, we don't do that with baby. Yay. And when the child says, I eat my food. That's nice. I ate. Oh, you ate your food. The correction we use for little children in a natural environment is completely different from L2. In L2, learning starts, that's language two, second language, which is English in some cases. It starts in school and it doesn't start from babyhood. The child is already developing their cognitive skills, and for secondary learners, they are more advanced. Okay, so maturity plays a role in school, how children learn a language. Okay, so the child in school is taught while the child at home is not taught. Now, the exposure in school is usually less than the exposure to the child at home. There is usually no silent period in school. And the children learn rules while the baby who is learning at home does not learn the rules of the language. Now, the teacher in school uses controlled or freer practice, allows the learner to use their own expression sometimes, and sometimes uses multiple choice, fill in the gap, or tells them to choose and select and all that. The teacher praises learners, but not the same way as you praise a baby in a natural environment. And correction is not as good as with a baby. So what are we saying? We're highlighting these two differences so that we can take features from L1, the natural environment, and bring them into our classroom. That's why we're going to look at correction. How should we correct our learners, for example? So we're focusing on form. So when we're learning a language in a natural environment, we do not teach the rules of the language. But if you notice, the child learns the language, and with time, it's perfect. Just like native speakers. Nobody comes to say, this is how, this is subject plus this plus that. No, no, no. You're going to learn the language perfectly. How? Expose the child to the language. So it means then that in our classrooms, the more language we give the child or we immerse the child in, the better they might be in speaking the language. The more you allow them to try out the language like a baby without correcting them harshly and all of that, sometimes ignoring the mistake because it's not your focus. Your focus is something else. The more they pick up the language. Okay, so the learner can acquire a language through a silent period as in a natural environment. In school, we may not have a silent period, but we can do a lot of activities. So we expose the learner to a lot of English with a lot of interaction. We help the learners by paraphrasing. Okay, we don't have to force the learner all the time to try out structures. They should be permitted to make mistakes as they learn. Okay, we can teach them vocabulary, in a very convenient way. We can transfer methods from L1, from learning a language naturally, to L2, teaching English in the classroom. And I would like to say that we can also transfer those methods in teaching other subjects. Let's be kind to our learners. Let's not behave too strictly with them. Let's remember how babies learn efficiently. They learn a language efficiently. And by the time they are in school, they can speak the language mostly correctly. The phrases might be simple, the sentences may be simple, but they are communicating. So we can focus learners on form. Okay, so in a classroom, we tend to correct them, but we need to do it in a way that encourages them. Now, the role of error is quite important. Errors are a natural part of language learning. So when your students make mistakes, the heavens are not going to fall. It's natural to make a mistake. So we can have errors and we can have slips. Errors are mistakes that the learner cannot correct, while slips are mistakes they can correct. So we can say a slip of tongue, for example. Okay. Now, in the mother tongue, sometimes we have what is called mother tongue interference, which is called transference. Okay. Transference or interference. Okay. So, for example, a teacher is pronouncing the word ham, Harm, and they are pronouncing it as arm because of mother tongue interference. Okay, we call that transfer. So you need to understand where is the error coming from so you can know how to correct it. So learners make errors when they're experimenting with the language. So it's not as if they are completely wrong, they're just trying it out. It might be above their levels, so they make a mistake. So we need to know when this is happening. Okay, mistakes are made based on the level of development in the language. We call that developmental error. Okay, mistakes can be made by overgeneralizing. The learner is learning the language and is trying it out, and they've just learned plural and they say things like furnitures. They have not gotten to the part where they know that furniture is furniture in plural or singular. Then there is the interlanguage that learners have. All of these words I highlight, I hope you would look over them in your glossary. Take your time and look over them. Some of them you already know, so that in the TKT, when they give you an expression, you can say, oh, is it A, an interlanguage? B, is it transference or mother tongue interference? Is this a developmental error? You know the difference. You say, oh, it's overgeneralization. So an interlanguage is the learner's version of their own language. It could be mixed up with their native language, English and their native language, or English with their own way of using the language. They're just learning the language. So errors can disappear or they can be fossilized. Fossilized is errors that the learner cannot stop making. They are mistakes. And we have fossilized errors in mother tongue interference. Some people, you can try telling them to pronounce the word 20 times over. They're adults. The mistake has fossilized. They cannot stop themselves from introducing an H where there's no H sound, or removing the H sound, or one of those other interferences. Please ask your question. You are free to ask me a question. Please type it out on the chat. Okay, so a developmental error, how do we find that out? If you see that a learner is writing, even in IELTS, if a mistake happens once, and in another side, the learner gets it right. So, for example, maybe they spelled something, there's a mistake in the spelling of a word, it repeats and the spelling is correct. Then it's not a developmental error, it's a slip. The learner made a mistake. But to find a real error, a developmental error, it has to repeat itself throughout the text. So every time they say that word or write that word, they make a mistake. It comes again, they make the same mistake. Then you know what the problem is. It's a developmental error. They're at such and such a level in their knowledge of the language. And if it cannot be changed, it's fossilized. It's a fossil. So I'm waiting for you to ask me that question as I proceed. So what do we do? In English language teaching, we should increase fluency activities. Okay, so in fluency activities, we create language, we talk more, we can express ourselves more. And that's a skill we need for doing exams or answering questions in other subjects also. Someone's asking me a question. Is it possible for an adult teacher to change his or her mother's tongue interference? If yes, please how? You know, I don't know if I've had that problem, but a lot of them are fossilized because they've done it from childhood up until adulthood. It's extremely difficult to deal with it. It's extremely difficult. The learner has to first of all understand the difference between the language, their mother tongue, and the sound system, the phonology of the mother tongue. For example, I come from the Izon tribe, or what you call the Ijos. Okay? Now, if I had a mother tongue interference in my mother tongue, I would call a judge Zuz. Why? Because there's no J sound in Izon language. That's why while you call us Ijos, we actually Izons because we don't have the J sound in our language. So if the person can understand that the phonological system of their language is a cause, this new sound is not in their language, then they might deliberately introduce it by knowledge, but it's a very difficult process because in most cases it's been fossilized. But if it happens in a child, it can be corrected much easier when the child is still developing language. I've not had the experience, so I can't really tell you, but I know that I can, at my age, I can correct my pronunciation when I do it wrongly. You know, so if you follow a deliberate course and you know and you practice, you might be able to correct it, but it's not easy. So in fluency activities, let's not pay attention to mistakes when we're in fluency, when we're doing fluency. Sometimes teachers might ask learners to write because they just want them to produce the language and they don't want to focus on grammar, grammatical error. You know, they just encourage them for creativity. All right. But in the grammar class, we focus on grammar. But if the composition is focusing on grammar, we can do that. But let's also encourage our learners to produce the language because the more they produce it, the richer their vocabulary is, the more advanced they are in the language. Now, some errors are more important to correct than others. You need to be selective. There's an error you will correct, you will miss your point and forget that you're supposed to be focusing on something else. Now, correction should also depend on the stage of learning. Okay, so if the learner is at a stage where they made a mistake for an item of grammar or language that is higher than the current level, you may not need to correct it at that stage. Just focus on where they are. And well done. Oh, great, you did well. All right. Don't focus too much on that, depending on the stage they're in. Teach older learners about interference so that they can begin to self correct. Okay. Expose learners to a lot of language to help them correct themselves. The more the language or English they learn or they are exposed to, they're listening to maybe TV programs spoken in English, they're reading books, they are listening to songs, their language becomes richer. And that's why today we have little kids that you know of who are speaking with American accents and they've never been to America. Why? They've been listening to English from cartoons, American cartoons. So create opportunities for correction using controlled activities. So if, for example, the mistake is in past tense, then focus on doing activities that show how the past tense is created, constructed. Use reformulation by repeating what the learner has said without calling the attention to the error. So the learner says, I eat my biscuit, and that's an error of a 5-year-old. I eat my biscuit, ate your biscuit, ate. And then that's all. You don't have to say, oh, you're wrong, or it's this. I eat my biscuit. The teacher says, oh, you ate your biscuit. And that's all. You don't need to say, oh, you are wrong. Or you can use echo correction. I eat my biscuit. Eat. And if the learner is at the right level, the child will say, oh, I ate my biscuit. Okay, so learning to use the correct correction method is important. Should you be correcting a learner who is 5 years old with echo correction, or should you use reformulation? I eat my biscuit. Ah, I ate my biscuit. Or should you say, I eat my biscuit? Eat? You might use this for an older learner, and the child will know immediately, ah, I ate my biscuit. Okay? So also you can use reformulation even for adults who are learning a language. And remember to choose when to um, to do the correction. You don't have to correct everything and at every time. Thank you very much. We finished our 2 slides and we will proceed.